So welcome everyone to the Town of Richmond Planning Commission for Wednesday, February 5th, 2025. We have a quorum of our members. There's an echo. Why is that? And we'll start, if that echo goes away, we'll start with some introductions. We have a new member of the Planning Commission who's here with us at the Town Center today. So we'll have a brief round of introductions, and I'm going to let our new member start by introducing himself. And I think that might be your microphone.
Yep, that's your microphone.
Can people hear me all right on the screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sweet. Thank you. My name is Bryton. Thanks.
Yeah.
I moved to Richmond last year. I've been kind of chatting with Virginia and Keith about getting involved, and just at this week's select board meeting, the select board gave me the go ahead. I came to Richmond to start the master's degree in food systems up at UVM. So I'm doing some work there with land use decision-making processes at the Intervale Center is the subject of my master's research. And yeah, before this, my background is in human-centered design and engineering, software engineering. But the design work that I've done, a lot of it has been kind of community engagement focused, finding ways to work with groups of people with different values and different needs to design solutions or software or whatever it may be. In my case, it was often like educational curricula was what I did my capstone work on. Yeah, so I'm excited to be here and to serve the town with y'all and to help with the new town plan in the coming year.
Excellent.
Great. Welcome. So then maybe go ahead, Chris.
No, it's just Bryton, what's your last name?
Moeller.
Moeller.
M-O-E. Yeah.
Like the tooth?
Like the tooth, pronounced just like the tooth.
Okay. Moeller like the tooth.
Where do you live? Where do you live in town?
Fine.
Johnny Brook Road.
All right.
Welcome
to Richmond.
Right.
Thank you. Yeah, looking forward to getting to know all you folks.
Okay, so we'll have a brief round of introductions from the other members who are here. Rebecca, you want to start?
Yes, hi. I'm eating dinner, so I'm not.
Yes. Very good.
I'm also sick, so excuse the appearance. I'm not my usual, radiant self today. I am the second newest board member or planning committee member after you. I joined in December, I think. I'm relatively new to Richmond as well. Followed my husband to Vermont with my 2 kids. And I have a long and extensive background, but I will tell you about it more later. Just in the interest of keeping us on track with time.
And where do you live?
Bay's Corner. So if you see a blue house on the hill with a lot of solar panels, that's mine.
Yeah, we like to have the different neighborhoods represented, so I think we're doing pretty good so far. Ian.
I live on Dugway Road, and I'm the third newest member of the Planning Commission, I think, about a year ago. And I don't have a lot of experience in planning, but I've been in town for a while and have kind of a little bit of knowledge about what's going on, and try to make some meaningful contributions to the conversation when I can. And that's about it.
Great. Cool. Thank you. How about Chris?
You're muted, bud.
Chris.
Sorry about that. I've been on the planning commission for a while. I don't know quite where I fall on the continuum. I'm a former select board member and member of the Richmond Climate Action Committee and involved in have a particular interest in energy efficiency work, and I live on West White Hill Road near Jonesville.
Great. Yes, I think you are the next most recent member of the committee. Then I'm the next most recent member this time around of the committee. So this is my second time on the planning commission. In the late 90s, I was on it. I was also on the select board, also on the Richmond Climate Action Committee as well. And as Mark will point out, we're always waiting for the day when everybody has to ride bicycles. But anyway, that day is probably not coming right away at 4 degrees or whatever it is outside tonight. So yeah, a longstanding interest in planning. Was a veterinarian. That was another career that I had. And so I'm back for a second time around. Okay, I think Mark is probably the next most recent member, having been on the committee for quite some time.
Well, Allison's on, but yes, hi there. I missed the introductions. Is that Peyton? Your name?
It's
Bryton.
Oh, Bryton. Excuse me. Couldn't make out the handwritten name tag. We'll have to get you something printed up looking pretty. But
Yeah.
I'm Mark Fossil. I live up on Hillview Road, across from pretty much the Berry Farm. I've been on the commission since 2009, and I've been living here since 2002. I had 2 boys who went through the school system, finished up in the mid-teens. Been active in their sports and the commission since then. So
right. I also live on Hillview Road, so we have an overrepresented neighborhood, but
No good.
yeah. All right, and Allison, who's been on the planning commission for, I don't know, 30 years.
Something like that. Can you, am I coming through? Can you hear me?
Perfectly.
Yeah, okay, good. Because my computer's a tiny bit temperamental. Yeah, and I joined the planning commission about 40 years ago, I think, when I've lived in Richmond for a very long time. I'm a native Vermonter and actually a Mayflower descendant. And so I'm very devoted to Vermont and the traditions of Vermont and the country and all. But I love Richmond. One of the things I love the most about Richmond is I drive out of my yard and I turn left and I go into the hills in the country and kind of the old way of Vermont. I drive out of my road and I turn to the right and I go to Burlington. And it's a whole different culture, but it's a very interesting place to live. And I think we have a special spot. My greatest concern these days is that God's own Richmond, I've said this a number of times, but we have the Winooski River, Route US 2, and steep slopes. And this has created a number of challenges for many people. And I'm very concerned about the people that live on Cochrane Road and other areas that have been flooded in the recent too many rains. But I have a lot of faith in this town, and I will continue to work for the town as long as I can.
Great.
Thank y'all.
So a bit of an introduction. Okay, well, let's proceed with our agenda. We'll get to know everybody, and at some point we'll all meet together in the town center, maybe in the summer, so we can all get together, or maybe at Stone Corral or something. Anyway, let's
Or
review the
Allison's
agenda.
pool.
Or Allison's pool. Yes.
Allison's pool is a good place to meet. Everybody
have a-
comes here and has fun. And
Planning Commission meeting at the pool.
Yeah, I'll wear my speedo.
absolutely.
Sounds good. Thank you, Allison. All right, everybody good with the agenda? Any adjustments needed to the agenda?
No
I am not
adjustment.
seeing any.
I was hoping we could talk just a little bit, because we haven't met frequently for the last couple of months, just about projecting forward a little bit, what our plans are for the major items that we're working on, and sort of putting them on the calendar a little bit, if you'd be willing to do that.
Yeah, if we have time, we could do it today under updates and other business.
Okay.
If we don't, we'll put it on the agenda, for next time. We're going to start. Certainly in March, we have to have our organizational meeting as well and elect officers. That would be a good time to do it. And, maybe tonight, maybe on the 2nd February meeting where we will be talking a little bit about the town plan. So yes, I think that's a good idea, Chris. We have one guest, it looks like, over the Zoom, so I will offer public comment on any non-agenda items. I don't see any hands or hear anyone. I'll assume that our guest might want to comment on our agenda items.
I'll comment on, Fran, I'll comment on the agenda item, as it comes up.
Okay, thank you, Fran.
Hi, Fran.
Okay. All right. So next up is to review the minutes of the January 15th meeting. Does anyone have any corrections, additions, comments on those meetings?
No.
Okay, not seeing any hands or hearing any comments. We will accept those minutes into the record as written. Okay. So moving on to our substantive agenda. Number 5 is a continuation of the public hearing on amendments 4.7, 4.8, 6.8, and 7, the flood hazard overlay district, with discussion of input from A&R floodplain managers, if available, which it is. They came through at the last minute with their words. So I think what we need is, just to be complete, we could have a motion to reopen this public hearing, to continue the public hearing. Would anyone like to make that motion?
I will make the motion.
Second.
Looks like Allison.
All right, Allison is making the motion to open the continuation of the public hearing. Is there a second?
Second.
Anybody want to raise a hand? Oh, Ian raised his hand, so Ian is seconding the motion. Okay. So is there anyone who's opposed to reopening the continuation of the public hearing?
Having audio problems again.
Uh-oh, we're having a little technical difficulty here. Can you all, Ian, can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay.
I can hear you.
Okay, great.
Can you hear us?
Can you hear Chris?
Do you hear me? Apparently not.
Yes, yes, I could hear you, Chris.
And I
Yeah,
can
but I
hear
don't
you,
think-
Chris.
But I don't think Virginia can hear me.
I didn't think so either because you seconded twice. I heard that.
I'm not hearing her.
I don't
Oh,
see
No, I
that.
think we lost her altogether.
Okay.
Yeah, all we got is
No.
is
Now they're back.
Oh, no.
We're
Oh,
here.
there-
What's
well, they
happening
were.
is
I see Bryton.
what's happening is our speakers are not working again like they did 2 weeks ago. And it automatically switched over to a different speaker.
Is it the Epson PJ, the first?
Yeah, no,
Now everything seems to be working.
We can hear
Hello?
you fine, that's for sure. It's got to be your speakers. You're right.
oh, it's us. It's definitely us, but
That's, yeah, that sounds all right.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. You're kind of quiet, but we can hear you.
that's us.
Can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Okay. So we're good.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
if you're okay with the way the sound's coming through, then yeah, but it's not working here for some reason.
Right.
Oh, gee.
Okay, so I guess we'll just have to talk loud if we want to have any kind of volume.
It is.
There we go.
It just,
I think we got it. Okay, so does anyone have any objection to us reopening this rather than taking a vote? We'll just see if there's any negative votes. I don't expect any. All right, since no one objects, we will assume that the hearing is reopened. Voted affirmatively unanimously. Okay. So if everybody has looked at the packet, you will see in there the letter that Keith and I wrote explaining our position to Kyle and the other folks at ANR. And the response that came back was that they thought that it was okay. We had made some small changes that we'll go over in a minute, looking at the actual document itself, based on their earlier comments, that they felt more permitting was needed. So you'll see what we've done that seemed to satisfy the requirements. Keith and I went through the whole checklist that the FEMA folks use to see if you're in accordance with the flood insurance program, and found a couple that were possibly problematic, which we mentioned as number 16 and 17 in the letter, if you see that, and we changed those. So basically, they're saying that they are okay with this. And, their only caveat is that, well, FEMA's going to look at it when they do the maps. But they also made that same caveat when they encouraged us to use their model language, which we didn't want to because we already had a perfectly good functioning
Yeah.
a good functioning overlay district to begin with. So we didn't want to switch to their exact language. So we were very explanatory in this letter that we sent out, and they seem to be fine with that. They said FEMA's going to look at it. If FEMA does look at it when they redo the maps, then you will have a period of 6 months to correct any deficiencies, which we don't really believe we're going to have. So does anyone have any questions or anything that they want to say about this? Do you all feel that this is satisfactory to go to the select board, that this is going to be good enough for them? That ANR is on board with what we have submitted to them?
yes.
Yes, so I'm not seeing any hands. Am I missing any hands or hearing any comments?
Sounds good to me.
All right. So do you want to look over the couple of changes that we felt it was necessary that we make to accommodate ANR's comments that they had made in earlier correspondence? Okay, I think the main one is that, we had suggested that we have a definition called incidental structures, which would be things like garbage cans, dog waste stations, picnic tables so that those items could be moved in and out of the park as needed.
This is the meat of the change here.
So what we did was we took that away because A&R thought that was a red flag. And
Yeah.
we added it to this category that we had already had, insignificant activities, and which is incorporated into the FEMA guidelines. There's this whole book of 483 pages that are the FEMA guidelines. Insignificant activities is actually in there. So we put these things, we just added those to the insignificant activities category. All those picnic tables and stuff that we want to put in and out of the park. However, to meet the ANR's concerns, we also made these things require a permit. It's not, they do not have to go to the DRB, like conditional use approval items, but they will need to go to the zoning administrator and get a permit. It should be a fairly simple process. And they also have to abide by the regulations for any structure that is a permanent structure. In other words, they cannot move laterally, so they will have to be fixed to the ground. ANR did not like the idea of these things just floating around in case of a flood. So they're going to have to be anchored in some way. So whatever anchoring we feel is suitable, the trash cans may need to be on a post. Picnic tables may need to be tied to a tree. I don't know. Whatever,
Or chain to a fence or
chain
a
to
backstop.
something. They'll have to be anchored so that they're not floating about, but they are. This will be a relatively simple permitting process. So that was one category of things that ANR didn't like. The other category of things were the temporary structures, which are different from insignificant activities. The insignificant activities are things that we anticipate will be there permanently, like a permanent post with a trash can on it. That's not temporary.
Yeah.
This other category of things are temporary, which we already had in there. There was already a category in our current ordinance. These would be things like the soccer goals and the portable toilets that we might want to have during the baseball season. These are
Right.
items that are removable. They do not have to be fixed to the ground
Yeah.
because we have required, they will also need a permit from the zoning administrator. They will need in the permit to state someone who could remove these. Temporary structures are ones that, in the case of an impending flood, might not happen all the time, but for many floods, they're impending, and we will know about it, and they can be removed. They will have to have a person who is responsible for removing them. And they are time limited. So it's half the year. So it's like the summer season. We can have tents for the 4th of July. They come and go. They're temporary. We can have tents for the farmer's market. They come and go. This category of things we have allowed not to have to be fixed to the ground, but they have to have someone who's responsible for them. So those are the main changes that we made, and they occurred in the definitions. If we go to the table of uses or activities, you will see that we have had to make changes here. We've had to get rid of incidental structures. Insignificant activities, we've added a P, they have to be permitted. They were exempt before, but ANR didn't like that. So we made a permitting process for them. And temporary structures above this or below this?
Down. I think they're down.
Down? I thought they were, you skipped over a little piece at the beginning. Yep. Okay, so temporary structures they were prohibited in the floodway, but we have made them allowed, but they have to be permitted. So those are the main substantive changes that we made. And this was to fulfill the needs of the NFIP checklist
The permitted use.
where they wanted us to have permits for these things. They're big on permitting. So I think that's the main thing. Yeah, Allison.
Yeah, thank you, Virginia. I'm just a little bit curious about the permitting for the structures in the flood hazard zone. I think you know from my past comments that I've had some concern about that. I wondered if there could be a little bit more information about that.
About so what part of the flood hazard zone? So we've got the flood hazard zone outside the floodway, which you see as the first column in this table, and then there's the floodway itself. So do you have a question or a comment about one or the other of those? You can see they have some of them are differently required.
I wish that I had time to study this a little more carefully, but I just want to say in general that I'm concerned about the people that live along Cochrane Road and the areas of our town where the water comes up really fast and goes down really fast, that if we have some adequate help to them, that's all. That's my concern.
Right. Well, if they live in the flood hazard area already, they are grandfathered, they're permitted
Yeah.
to go on living there and to make certain repairs to their property
You can expand.
Mhm.
and expand. They can do, we didn't want to take away the rights of the people who already live in the flood hazard area.
I agree with that completely.
So,
Yeah.
if they have a temporary structure,
Mhm.
then, it's a new temporary structure, one that hasn't existed before, then they would get a permit for it. If it's a temporary structure that, like a tent carport,
Yeah.
that has existed before, then they can continue to have that. We
Yeah.
can't protect them from that. They will have to protect themselves by taking away things that they don't want to have to keep fixing.
Yeah.
So their rights have not been taken away. They've been increased, in fact, for instance, under temporary structures, where if they were in the actual floodway. Do we have any people who live in the floodway?
We don't.
No, we don't have any people who have residences in the floodway. They are in the part of the flood hazard overlay district that's outside of the floodway. The main part of the floodway is the park, and then all along like Cochrane Road, where it's like
Right.
wetlands and stuff, across from
Yeah.
Cochrane ski area. But the houses that get flooded, both in the village and in the hills, which now get flooded from
Yes.
erosive flooding.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So, we're not taking away any of their rights. We're not telling them that they have to do better for themselves, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, most of the changes that we've promulgated are directly for Volunteers Green. I mean, but we have to obviously be under the umbrella of all the properties that are within the floodway. It's not just Volunteers Green is in the floodway. I mean, there are other properties that are in the floodway. So that's really long and short of what we're doing here.
Fran, you have your hand up.
Yes, so when, say, the Three Parks Committee, hopefully at some point, goes to, or soccer or someone else goes to get a permit, how specific is the permit? I mean, is it really gonna spell out what we need to know? Is it just gonna be a general permit?
I think you're going to have to get a permit for a specific thing.
Mhm.
But the rules for that specific thing how am I gonna know, how's an applicant gonna know exactly what the rules are? By going to the zoning document, or is Tyler gonna have a crib sheet that sort of
Yeah,
helps
it's-
us?
It's in the definition specifically, Fran. There are call outs of specific structures, and it is semi-broad, not overly broad.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, we certainly would guide anybody who's permitting this along the process. That really shouldn't be an issue. So if I go back to temporary structures, just as an example. So let's do that. T comes after S.
Yes.
Okay.
So it gives you, you know, a lot of quick and easily removed.
Mhm.
So that's just a quick permit.
Mhm.
So I would think, I mean, I'm not a zoning administrator, but the requirements under temporary structures are that it is got to be in place for 180 days or less. So that's one thing.
They're not buildings.
So it's not a building. Does not have to be fixed to the ground. So, you know, a structure that can be removed. So the zoning administrator is going to have to decide, is this a removable structure? The ones that we have listed seemed like the ones that you folks were interested in. So
So it should
I-
be a pretty simple permit application, I guess is.
it should
Well-
be fairly simple, and I mean, do you think there need to be like a policy? You know, because the zoning department has not only the ordinance, but then it has policies about how they understand these things.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's going to have to be fleshed out over time, but I mean, this is a pretty good template to start with. Tyler will certainly look at this definition, and, you know, it is semi-broad. It's not overly broad, but it gives you some examples. So, I mean, if you come in with I don't know, a 400 square foot tent, I'm not sure how we would go about that, but, you know, I don't think it's prohibited as long as it's not there for 180 days and you can remove it quickly. That's
Okay, so what this is saying, though, it's like we have to inform, say, the parade committee, all the sports participants that once this is in place, that,
Yep.
you know, up until now, they've just sort of done it.
Right.
That they really need permits, you know, they need to see Tyler and get a permit before they do some of these simple things. So we need to make sure that we let those people, you know, everyone that might be affected know that there's sort of been a change.
Yeah, and I think that there should be, you know, I think it's a good idea to have someone like all those soccer goals that are mangled out there. You know,
Yes.
really, someone should be taking those away at the end of the season. They don't need to stand out there for the whole rest half of the year and possibly be flooded. That seems to me like a good idea to have someone take them away. Let's say, what are some other things on here? The porta potties, yeah, someone will have to be
Yeah.
responsible, either the highway department, you know, the town highway department. They could be ones who are responsible. Little League could be responsible. Just somebody will have to be responsible for them. The
So,
tent, like the farmer's market, I would think one permit could be given for the whole summer for
mhm.
the farmer's market tents.
I mean, it's a pre-existing use also, so I'm not sure that it even needs it.
Right, that is a pre-existing use. The porta potties is not a pre-existing use, so they would have to get a permit.
Yeah, food trucks.
Food truck, somebody is going to have to be responsible. If the Little League wants a food truck there for a game that's gonna need food, then it's gonna be the Little League people. They have an organization. They can be responsible for the food truck.
Yeah, we certainly don't
Yeah,
want to.
I'm not arguing against this. I'm just saying
Yeah.
we need to inform people, once this is in place, that this is what they have to do.
Yeah, but they will have to get a permit. So, yeah, it was not something that we were particularly seeking to do, but it seemed to meet the needs of A&R.
Well, in the long run, I think we'll be better off, and we won't have those soccer goals mangled and still, we were snowshoeing and cross-country skiing, and you still see some remnants of that kind of thing, because nobody took responsibility.
Yeah, and they don't need to be there in the winter, so we'll have to
Right.
find another place to store them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, any other questions or comments? We could go to the standards for the insignificant activities. Those are the things that are permanent but small, who also have to get a permit from Tyler. Like, some of the things are pre-existing, presumably they would kind of be grandfathered, but if they aren't grandfathered and it's a new temporary structure, a new insignificant activity, like you want to put up a new flagpole, then it is going to have to abide by the development standards. So it has to be anchored. It has to be made of resistant to flood damage type of materials. These are like no-brainers, kind of. Constructed by methods and practices that minimize flood damage. Any kind of wiring has to be out of the way of the flooding, adequately drained, and located so as to minimize conflict with changes in the channel location.
Yeah, so this is boilerplate language.
Yeah, so this is language that has already been in the document. It has been in our floodplain ordinance since the ordinance was developed. And so most of the things that we're considering insignificant activities are already grandfathered. I don't know, are they gonna have to have a permit or not? I don't know.
Talk to Tyler about that,
Yeah.
but if it's an existing use that has been pre-existing, I wouldn't see why you don't need a permit for the porta potty or for the playground that's there now, so how's that any different than a farmer's
Right,
market?
and then it's relocation, then it's a relocation of a non-conforming structure.
But we certainly could talk to him about that, but eventually we got to the point where we just sutured in the temporary structures with the development standards.
Yep. So we don't think that any of the things that you all want to do are not going to be possible. Some of them may need a permit from the zoning administrator, and the ones that are relocating a building like the restroom will need to go to the DRB. And the relocation, the playground will go to the DRB so that there can be public input into the situation. But the changes that we have made to the non-conforming structures, the things that are already in the park, are now allowed to be relocated. That was one of the first changes that we made that will allow us to move things around in the floodplain.
Yeah.
But it will have to go to the DRB, so,
You'll need engineers.
yeah, so especially with the building, and the main thing it looks like FEMA is most concerned about is buildings.
Yeah.
The really main thing is residential buildings. That's the thing that they're
Yes.
most concerned about, because that's where the damage claims come in
Yes.
for
Right.
the insurance program. The next thing that they're concerned about is non-residential buildings. Like-
But buildings
But
nevertheless.
buildings that have 4 walls and a ceiling, and they are the ones that have to abide by the standards in here for non-residential buildings. The restroom would have to abide by those standards, which means it either has to be elevated above the level of the base flood elevation of the base flood, or
Mhm.
it has to be flow through, you know.
Yep, louvered, yeah.
So louvered, so that would have to be, that would be an engineer, a building that would need to be engineered, the restroom. That's pretty much the only thing that will need to have
Yeah.
to be engineered.
Can you show me where that is?
Sure, let's see, it's in this list. So section 6.8.16 has all the development standards.
Where are we?
You
I
go,
don't know where we
it's
are.
going the other way
You
here.
going the wrong way?
Yeah,
Imagine
see
that.
if you can find 6.8.16. Okay, here are the
Okay.
development standards. So all development, including the insignificant activities, but not the temporary structures, has to have these basic things, you know, the flood resistant materials and all that. Then you come down all of these letters, A, B, C, D, storage tanks, we can skip over that. You're not concerned with that.
Yeah.
Fully enclosed areas above grade. It's the next one, F, all existing residential structures to be substantially improved or replaced. This is the nonconformities. It's an existing, well, no, it's a non-residential, so it's G.
Yes.
All existing non-residential buildings have to abide by these 3 items. They have to be reasonably safe from flooding. Well, we're moving it to the place that's safer from flooding.
Yeah.
So
Correct.
that's gonna be okay. Then have either the lowest floor has to be 1 foot above the base flood elevation, dry flood proofing at least 2 feet above the base flood elevation.
And then if solely used for parking of vehicle storage, be wet proofed, wet flood proofed. But the big kicker that kicks you to the professional engineer is 3.
So, right, have structural design specifications and plans prepared and certified by a registered professional engineer or architect. That will have to be the case.
Hmm.
In number 2, let's see.
All 3 of them have to.
So what's dry flood proof exactly?
Dry flood proof is, you'd have what's like green board or something along those
Okay,
lines.
so that prevents the water from going in at all.
It doesn't rot,
It doesn't rot.
my understanding.
So, but does this say that, say we look at a pavilion that we're thinking would be level with the ground? Is this saying that it should be elevated to a minimum of 1 foot or?
No, because it's not a building.
Okay, it would not be considered a building?
Right. If it has, according to their definitions, it's only a building if it has 2 or more walls.
Okay,
So,
And a roof.
and a roof and a floor. We had originally put pavilions and recreational structures as being okay if they have 0 or 1 wall.
mm-hmm,
But FEMA wanted it to be less than 2 walls. Is that what they said? ANR, they had language requiring that it was a building if it had 2 or more walls. So the pavilion would have to have less than 2 walls.
mm-hmm.
So it could only have 1 or no walls. So, you know, what the band shell is, we put that in the category of recreational structures because it has 1 wall. It's a curved wall.
A restroom attached to a pavilion, the restroom itself would have 4 walls.
The restroom itself, any restroom building, whether you make it freestanding or attached to something else, is a building. And it is going to have these standards. If you want to
Okay.
put it right next, you know, like having a shared wall with a pavilion, then you still have a restroom building and a pavilion building. essentially, or a pavilion non-building. It's a structure, but it's not a single structure, you know. A&R was concerned about the restroom because that is a building.
Yeah.
So the restroom is going to have to be engineered. It's going to have to be, you know, you can put it wherever you want. You can make it share the wall, but it still has 4 walls.
Okay,
So that's about the best we could do with the restroom.
okay. Well, I mean, we are looking at some designs that Hillview Design Collaborative is showing us, you know, has created that sort of have a pavilion that's mostly open with maybe one wall, but part of it is hitching the restroom to that building. So
Yeah, well, they would share a wall. But
yes,
the pavilion is going to have to only have the 1 wall, and the
Yeah.
restroom is going to have the 4 walls.
okay. And they'd sort of be treated as one, but also separate.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, there's not,
Well, are you planning on moving the pavilion? But my understanding that's staying in the same place, is it not? The pavilion?
you mean the band shell?
The band shell,
Yeah, I'm sorry, wrong
we
nomenclature.
have some recent, we had an engineer look at the band shell. And has provided, if you go now to our last meeting last week, there will be, should be attached a letter from the engineer that talks about the existing band shell and its condition. So it would be, and then we're looking at thus a new, you know, there's no decisions to be made yet, but
Right.
so if it's cost prohibitive to fix the existing band shell or it doesn't make sense, then that would go away. And we would create a new pavilion that had the restroom facilities attached to it.
Mhm.
Okay.
And
Maybe-
the band shell itself right now is elevated, and to me, it's a water catcher. I mean, it has no way for water to flow through it. So
Right.
some of the designs we've looked at would let the water go through. But that's
Yeah.
all. That's all, you know, in our research right now.
Yeah, and that, you know, we didn't aim to make that decision whether we keep the band shell or lose the band shell, but to enable you to do either one of those things. So
Yeah. Yes.
maybe we could call it a restroom with a porch, you know, to kind of chill after the restroom. Never mind, Fran,
Yeah.
whatever. But I think either way, it's, if you consider it 2 things that are just right close to each other or 2 things that share a wall, that would be okay.
Okay.
So,
All right. Thank you.
yeah.
So the other thing is, chapter 7. Do we want to go there or are we done?
If we're done with this part. So does anyone have any other comments or questions about this, about how it would work? They were okay with the relocating piece as long as it does not increase the flood hazard. So moving the playground or the restroom to the higher elevation is not going to increase the flood hazard because it will potentially lessen it. It is still in the floodway, so, you know, there will still be some flood hazard associated with it. But so the current structures can be relocated, they can be remade, they can be remodeled. So this is why the playground can be reconstructed in some different way, as long as there aren't more pieces to it that could obstruct. So you can't really put a lot more pipes and tubes and things like that in it. So, but it can be rebuilt in some other way. So any other comments, questions? We have one other thing that we want to talk about after we've talked about these things that really have to do with the flooding. Yeah, Allison.
Yeah, I just want to say that I think this has been an astonishing challenge for us, just because we're of where we are located with the Winooski River and everything. And I think this is a good approach to trying to make the most of what we can within a reasonable level of safety with what's there. And I applaud the group for coming up with this. I don't know if it'll be adequate all the time for the future, but we're trying to make the best of what we have and do good things for the town. And I just would like to express positive feelings about it.
Right.
We like positive feelings.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think we're trying and recognizing that it's not perfect and we may still have some floods and I don't know. I've said it before, God's owned Richmond. There's certain things we can't do anything about.
Yeah, and I mean, the other challenge is going to be, it's not going to be cheap
Right.
to do these things anyway, I
Yes.
mean,
Yes.
when the bill comes in for
Yeah.
moving, for taking the band shell away, putting up a
Right.
pavilion and a restroom, moving the playground, that bill is not going to be inexpensive. So that's a whole other layer of work that is going to have to go into
Yes.
this. I'm talking a little bit to Fran right now, but so this is just the start. This is the enabling. This is
Mhm.
getting it through the ANR gatekeepers. And
Right.
so yeah, but seemed like okay. All right, so if there are no other comments about this part, we're going to go to section 7, which is definitions. So if you remember last time when we set the public hearing for this, we removed, or when we opened the public hearing, we removed the trails and recreation path definitions because we're going to have this future discussion about trails. There's been a lot of controversy about trails, what they are, recreation path, what that is. And looking at recreation facility, I wondered if we should maybe also delete that from this floodplain ordinance for right now, because it may possibly have some impact on the trails discussion. Are trails a recreation facility? What is an establishment actually? Is an establishment a thing or a parcel? Keith and I sort of have a difference of opinion about what establishment means. So
Yeah.
anyway, I thought I would open it up and you all can see what you think. If we get rid of recreation facility for right now and just leave it the way it is written in the document, we wouldn't have anything to do with section 7 right now. We'll leave it that all for the future discussion. So that was just a thought. I don't know if anybody has any thoughts about that. Ian.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. You should remove that.
Okay. Anybody else? Allison?
I agree.
Yeah.
That's a good,
Okay.
yeah, for now, remove it. Kind of.
Just for now. I mean, it's
Yeah,
a
just for
functioning
now.
definition as it is. It's just that it's only
Right.
big things. So it's functioning in some way.
Yeah.
And we don't know why it was made like that to begin with, why it was greater than 5,000 square feet. What's wrong with little
Right.
recreation facilities? Anyway, so there are sort of a lot of questions about that. And since we're going to open it up to talk about trails and recreation paths and what they are,
I think
doing,
so
taking
too.
this away.
No, it warrants some more study.
Yeah, I think that's That's right.
It's part of a greater discussion, and it's so, what I like to say, oh, well, I'm not gonna say de minimis, even though I wanted to. It's so incidental to this at this point, it's just
Right.
inconsequential. But it is definitely part of a greater discussion, so we
Yes.
still need more though.
Okay. Bryton, do you have any feelings about that yet? No.
No feelings about that yet. But
Okay, that's okay. How about Chris? What do you think? I mean,
No, I think it makes sense. It doesn't make sense to me that it just be restricted to larger facilities.
right. And I agree, but I'm not sure we've looked at all the possible unintended consequences, especially if we decide or somehow trails become a recreation facility, but okay.
I mean, Virginia, you said it could
Yes.
be fluid, right? So we can come back and change this or no?
If you wish to.
Oh,
So,
sure.
Virginia.
Okay.
You know, what I would assume is that we will just, if we take this out of our current discussion, when we have the trails discussion, we will talk about this.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Got
This
it.
will come up at the time of the discussion of what a recreation facility is. So, Rebecca, does that answer your question?
Yep, it does. Yeah.
Okay, so you would be okay with taking it out for right now?
Yep. I think we need more information anyways, so,
Mhm.
we can just keep it fluid.
Yeah. Well, we'll just keep it the way it is for now, and we'll just put it in on our list of things that we are gonna talk about. Yeah, we got the list going, so. Okay. All right, and who else? We've got,
Mark.
oh, Mark, I don't know if Mark doesn't want to comment on this probably. But do you want to comment on it, Mark?
The softball.
Where's Mark?
No.
Right, yeah. He's forsworn commenting on this packet. So, Alison, Ian, Chris, Rebecca, okay. All right, so we've got 5 people, including myself, who would like to take this out. So I think that counts as a
Yeah.
majority, so we will take this out for now. And so we will not be involving section 7 at all in this packet. Okay. So the next thing we need to do is close the public hearing, because it was a continuation of what we were just doing. So we'll need a motion made by somebody to close the public hearing.
Well,
Anybody want to make that motion?
so moved. I move that we close this public hearing.
Okay, that's Allison. Who's second? Is there a second to that?
second it. So
Yes.
All right.
Brighton's first vote. Bryton seconds this. Okay, any more discussion? No hands. All right, so all in favor of closing the public hearing should raise your hand or say aye.
Bye.
Aye.
Okay, Rebecca, we can't see you. Are you raising your hand?
Oh, sorry, I meant to say aye.
Aye, okay. Ian is saying aye. Mark is abstaining.
Chris said I too. then.
And Chris said aye, so.
Good.
Okay, so the public hearing is now closed. So the next thing that we do at this point when a public hearing is closed is the planning commission can further deliberate before we send this on to the select board. Or we can decide we're ready to send this to the select board, which is the next part of the procedure. Then they go through their whole public process. So now I would look for a motion to which of those you all want to do. If we want to send it to the select board, we will need a motion. If we want to go on deliberating, then somebody should just bring that up and we'll discuss it.
Do you have specific language to forward this to the select board?
I think if anything, I mean, I make a motion. No, I don't have specific language. I could whip it up real quick if you'd like me to. But something that just states, the flood hazard overlay district forwarded to the select board.
Well, it's the amendments, the planning commission is approving for transmittal to the select board. Amendments to section 4.7, 4.8, and 6.8. Along with the supporting materials. We will certainly send A&R's letter and our letter to A&R along with the document. And
Okay, I'll make a motion.
okay,
I
all right.
I make a motion that we forward the amendments that we have made to the flood hazard overlay district in sections 4.7, 4.8, and 6.8 to be transmitted to the select board for review.
Yes, that sounds good.
Mhm.
All right. Motion is made by Ian. Is there a second to this motion?
I'll second it.
Allison seconds
No,
the
Chris,
motion.
let Chris have it. That's fine.
Allison got there first.
Chris second. Okay, Allison seconded the motion.
It does go on your permanent record. I will say that.
Oh, I know.
All right. Is there any discussion about this? Is there anyone who is hesitant about it, except maybe Mark, but I don't know. Anyone who's got any qualms about doing this? Okay, now's a good time to.
Yeah,
Allison.
I'll be honest that I
Yeah.
have the qualms that I have are not the qualms of this group and what we're trying to do with what we have to deal with. The qualms
Yeah.
that I have is that I've said it many times, God zoned Richmond. And we're trying to do the best we can with a situation that has its natural resources challenges, but we're trying to do the best that we can. And I think that definitely deserves a chance.
Okay, so I'm going to take that as a vote for this motion.
You can do
All
that.
right.
Yes.
And so if there's no further discussion, we'll take a vote on this motion. Everyone who is in favor of the motion should raise your hand or say aye, or both.
Aye.
Aye.
Chris is an aye. Rebecca?
I cannot get my hand to work. Aye.
Okay, Rebecca's an aye.
Context, I'll just
Okay,
abstain from this
so
one.
you're going to abstain, and Mark, we're assuming is going to abstain. Okay, otherwise we have a majority of 5, so,
501.
okay, so that
502. Sorry.
502,
Yeah.
yeah. Unless Mark, do you want to abstain or do you want to vote no?
Where is Mark?
Mark is
Muted, maybe.
maintaining his silence.
Okay.
Okay, we'll call him an abstain.
Yeah.
All right, so that's good. We will forward this along with the supporting materials to the select board. They will probably put it on their next month sometime or the following month. We've got budget coming up. It may take a little bit to get it onto their agenda. Fran, you're okay with this? I take it. You're not a member of the commission, but just as a member of your committee.
Yes, I'm definitely in favor of what you've done and thank you for trying to make the best out of a
Yeah.
difficult situation and allowing our committee to move forward and again, try to make the best out of a difficult situation. Thank
Right.
you.
Great, and thank you for your committee's work.
There's a watershed moment.
Yeah.
No pun intended.
Okay, so, very good. That's number 5. So number 6 on the agenda. If you recall, at our last meeting on the 15th of January, Chris asked a good question about the accessibility standards. So we're now moving to the Jolena Court District. And we're almost ready to send, we have already scheduled a planning commission public hearing on this. But a question came up about where these standards came from, the accessibility and adaptable standards. So what we did, Keith and I looked at from whence these standards came. We looked further into it, and we've made this language that's in green that we would like to substitute for the language that was in what we approved for a public hearing, because this is more complete and it tells you a little bit more about where these standards came from. And what we have always been trying to do with this is to make it possible for a builder to want to do this, but on the other hand, to make it somewhat more difficult in order to earn the extra marketable unit that they would get from providing 2 of these adaptable accessible units. So anyway, we looked into it further. There are a few documents that relate to this work. One is the Uniform Federal Accessibility Standards. The second one is the Vermont Access Board that we had no idea existed, but there is such a thing, the Vermont Access Board, who promulgates rules about what is acceptable for an adaptable unit.
And it's under the umbrella of the fire code, I believe.
Yeah, it's under fire and public safety is where this Vermont Access Board is located.
Makes sense.
So going down to the bottom of this page, the adaptable features are also found, no, a little back up a little bit. The adaptable features are also listed in documents from the Vermont Housing Finance Agency on universal design policy. They have a document. So the main things are the Vermont access rules and the universal design policy. These are documents that the state uses for any programs that they might have or financing that they have for buildings that have adaptable units. So this seemed like a good place to start. So we come down to the required features of the dwelling unit site. Those we already had. They're the same as from these documents that I just mentioned. We did change the elevator language based on what Chris said last time. Then we come down to the required features of the dwelling unit. So it turns out that all new residential dwelling units, except for owner occupied or owner built, will have to abide by these first 5 rules. And there's a checklist, there's a compliance checklist that anybody who's building any kind of apartment or home that is not already owned and specified as to what it's going to be like, you have to sign this disclosure of compliance form with some of the things that we had on the list. So these things are required of everybody who does this building. So we started there. Those are required of everyone. So they're not like extra and above effort that is made above and beyond that should earn these other units. And then we went down to the universal design list and the Vermont Access Board rules and added these other items. So if you want to, we didn't put all of the requirements in under the universal design because there were some that seemed a little too specific for us. But if you want to go and look at those documents, that's where you will find them. You will find them under Vermont Housing and Finance Agency Universal Design Policy and under the Vermont Access Board rules for adaptable and visitable. One of the things that they emphasized was that these units should be able to be visited by someone, even if they weren't lived in by someone who had physical limitations. Then they need to be able to be visited by someone with physical limitations. This is especially important, I guess, for seniors because, you probably have some friends who have some physical limitations. So this list is slightly different from the other one, but not a whole lot different. The original list came from the Cathedral Square people. We did in the end leave out the pocket door requirement. The universal design mentioned that you could have a pocket door, but it didn't seem to be required. So we didn't feel like maybe that one was the most important one. So anyway, that's where these items came from. And I think that was the basic question that Chris was asking. It was a good question. Anyone have any comments about these or? There's a hand raised somewhere.
Yeah, you're up.
Okay. Oh, there it is. Yep.
So this is just pertaining to new construction, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So what if someone who owns a multi-unit building in the village and they pull a permit to do something? Are they going to be subjected to this?
Well, it depends on what that something is. If they were expanding and they wanted to increase their density and utilize this scheme, then yeah, they would have to follow this.
Okay.
And
So this is sorry.
the first 5 items on this list, A through whatever it is, E, if you build a house, and I have talked to Gary Bresser, who is just in the process of building a house, and he was required, even though he's never been required to do this before for all buildings,
Right.
he is required to sign this disclosure of compliance form because he's building a house that is not pre-owned. So he actually has to abide by the first 5 of those. A house or an apartment building, if it's new construction.
Yeah.
If it's a conversion of a house into apartments, would that require?
That's not something that we administer. I mean, that's something that they have to get the fire code. They have to get that approval from the fire
State.
marshals. Yeah. And how
So
that works, I
yeah.
don't know. We have no real window into how that works.
So the enforcement of this is from the fire marshal?
It's from the state, yes.
It's a state requirement. We had never heard of it before, but apparently, and there's, it's another one of those things like the CBs and the RBs where the developer just signs that they've done this.
Okay.
So, and then it goes to the fire marshal or to the state
Well, yeah,
Department of Public Safety, Department of Fire and Public Safety. That's where a copy of this is filed. Whether they ever do anything about it, I don't know.
So like when you finish the construction of your home, the fire marshal doesn't show up to say, yeah, they did all this stuff.
No, I think typically whoever developed it, whoever your builder was, is required to do that. Vermont's
Right.
very lax in that regard.
So it's an honor system kind of thing.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
an
it
honor
is.
system.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
In this case, since we're putting these into our density bonus scheme, we are going to look at whether this is done, right?
If that, yeah, that disclosure of compliance needs to be submitted to us, but that's only if they're using this.
Yeah, it's only if, I mean, it needs to be submitted to us if they're using the density bonus scheme, and we need to enforce it, you
And,
know? And it'll be
but-
with our certificate of occupancy, I suppose.
Well, these
We
bottom
need to-
ones certainly would.
So, so Keith, are you saying that I'm not trying to hold anybody's feet to the fire. I'm really just curious, but like, so someone from the planning office is gonna show up to make sure this stuff gets done, or do you just take them at their word?
No, we would show up during the certificate of occupancy aspect and make sure that we have that compliant disclosure of compliance, or that should actually be part of the certificate of occupancy
Okay.
application. And then absolutely, these down here absolutely must be done.
Well,
Mhm.
I think the first ones you would want to
Well, I think that
look at, and you could, they're visually inspectable.
well, I have no idea if the bathroom walls are reinforced. That's an honor system thing here.
Well,
Yeah.
but the bars are gonna be in.
Some things, yeah.
Yeah, but the grab bars would have to be there, yeah.
Right,
Yeah, and you know, at least one floor exterior door that is 36 inches wide.
Yeah, but I
Would
mean,
we
that
check
that's
that?
universal building codes, so. Yeah, I mean, well, sure, we'll take a look at it, but. You know, for me, if I was to do that, if I was the compliance officer on that, I'd have that disclosure of compliance. And then I'd make sure those additional compliances were taken care of.
Well, I think you should look at it,
Well, that's, well.
maybe.
well,
I mean,
well,
this is, these
that
are,
bridge when we come to it.
this is a list of all the things that they have to do in order to get this density bonus.
Mhm.
We need to make sure that they're doing them as best we can. I mean,
And the first 5 bullet points they have to do irregardless of the density bonus.
right, they're supposed to regardless of the density bonus situation, but that isn't our concern at the moment.
Right, okay.
So it is
Thanks
our
for
concern
clarifying all that.
here. Yeah. Yeah, well, it's,
Well, my hope is that I'm looking at at 5 of these units here in the next couple of years, you know,
Mhm.
that's my hope.
Yeah.
Hope is not a strategy.
right, well. Anybody else want to talk about this? You know, obviously, if we're gonna have this as a bonus item, these senior compatible units, we have to have some criteria. So this was the most exact set of criteria that we could come up with.
Definitely been fleshed out, that's for sure. I guess I would ask, and not to steal your thunder, does anybody have any objections to how this was written? That would be my first question.
You mean the way it was laid out?
Yeah, the way all this, I mean, are there any objections to what we're requiring here? And then my second question would be, is there anything else that anybody wants to add to this?
I'm curious why we included the top part that is required of them anyway, separate from this document.
Well, I mean, that was definitely a question, whether to do it like that or not, but the point of giving these as bonus units, so the point of the bonus unit section is to allow builders to have greater density than has been existing for their district.
Yep.
If they give something back in return above and beyond the units.
Got that part.
So if you make 2 that are like this, then you get 1 extra marketable. So they need to earn it somehow.
Yep.
So the first 5 things they have to do anyway. I don't know. That's the only reason that I could think of.
Is,
Well, the reason to do it like this was to indicate that they had to do these anyway. So they weren't really extra things that would be earning them some kind of a
Right.
bonus. But I mean, we could have just made a list of A through whatever, and maybe that would be easier to understand. I'm open to that
I'm wondering
suggestion.
why include them at all if they have to do them anyway, and another document requires them. Why not just delete A through E?
Well, because I don't know that people know that they have to do them. I mean, this builder
That's
that I
fair.
was talking to, this was the first time he'd ever seen a disclosure of compliance from the Department of Fire Safety, and so
I
he
think it's
didn't really
clar-
know that
it's
that these
claritative.
were
Yeah,
it's declarative also.
yeah.
required.
Maybe we could just refer to the section 2907 so that if that section ever changes, it doesn't force us to have to update this text.
Right. Well, that's another question that we always face with writing zoning is should
Yeah.
we just be referring to these things? But then it means you have to go to another document. And if it's this, it's sort of only lightly or barely enforced anyway, does that just mean people don't do it really?
Right.
Or
But Bryton makes a good point. If this is meant to be harmonized with this other document or drawn from that, what happens if the other document changes?
Good
yes.
question.
Well, should we? I mean, we could. What do you think, Chris? Do you think we should just refer to the other document or this document that people haven't really heard of, or do you think
I
we
run
should
into this all the
disclaimer?
time. I run into this all the time in my day job, and there's not a simple a simple answer here, rather. But I
Yeah.
feel more comfortable doing the direct reference if the intent is to be consistent with that, not to impose, not to add confusion to the situation. I think including direct reference will have the desired effect of getting the builders to look at something that maybe they, unwittingly haven't been complying with and should comply with. But it avoids the problem of maybe then eventually having a mismatch between what's here and what's in the source document.
So you would recommend language, something like, in addition to the requirements that are required by the policy of Vermont Division of Public Safety and Fire Standards, in addition to those requirements, we would then have this next paragraph
Yes.
and leaving these things out.
Couldn't you just remove everything from after this comma? Just go, all new residential dwellings should comply with 20 VSA 2907, which is all this.
Yep.
And then say, in addition to these requirements, move forward.
And that's a link, so you
That's
just
it.
click on it and you see the document.
Yep.
Okay, so anybody else want to weigh in on that?
So all that would go, and this would be sutured in with this. Because this is more declarative, more than anything. I mean, we can't require it. I mean, the state requires it.
Right.
Well, we can require it if we want.
Well, if you want, that's true. I mean,
We
could,
can
but
require it.
I'm
We
not
can
building-
require anything that we want. We're only requiring these other things because they're lifted off another document.
But what we want is to be consistent with the state on this, right? And we want to provide emphasis that builders are expected to comply with this. Isn't that right?
Yeah, well, that's the
Yeah.
declarative aspect of
Right.
it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's something that's required regardless.
But as we've discussed, and as I think we all know practically, there's never 100% compliance with the regulations, and particularly in Vermont, where a lot of this is voluntary,
Hmm.
builders may not know. So I think there's value to including the reference here. I'm not arguing against that. I'm just saying let's do it in such a way that we don't end up interfering with the source document inadvertently, or the source regulation rather.
But so you would recommend taking out everything after the first line of the first sentence in green, right? Is that
Yeah, I
what you're
like that idea. Yep.
Okay. Anybody else have any comments?
I think I'm less of a like suggestion, but I'm curious broadly what the other possible standards would be for this. Like we drew from a couple of organizations that had very specific like F through whatever. And it's not my area of expertise, but are there competing standards where you're choosing between organization A and organization B's standards, or is this the one
I think
thing
it's
that
it was a suite of options that we had.
you found? Okay.
Yeah.
So there were a few different, universal design was in this and
Yeah, there's the,
accessibility.
yeah, the Vermont access
So that's where those numbers come from.
rules.
The 400 square feet is arbitrary.
Yeah.
Right.
The only one that's arbitrary is the 400 square feet. And that was not based on these documents,
Based on not living in a closet.
right? And because we didn't want to make these units 100% accessible. So there's accessible and then there's adaptable. And the accessible is totally arranged so that a person in a wheelchair can use them.
Yeah.
But that has some limitations in terms of if you're renting it to people who aren't in wheelchairs. There are things about it that they don't like.
Yeah.
So the adaptable kind of rules were developed apparently to allow them to be modified. You know, all the basic like architectural details, like the width of the halls that aren't easily changed, are accessible.
More accessible.
Then the pieces that can be changed, like the closets that you can take away, or, you know, providing knee space under the basin in the bathroom, that's modifiable.
Yep.
And so that counts as adaptable. So, you know, the Americans for Disability Act, the ADA, has an immense amount of detail about true accessible units. So we had to look through that, but we wanted to go more towards the adaptable. And this document, the Vermont Housing and Finance Agency Universal Design Policy, apparently was written by VHFA in conjunction with ARPA.
Okay.
The American Association of Retired Persons or People.
AARP.
AARP, right. It was written in conjunction with them. And so that seemed like a document that made sense for us because that's what we want. We initially wanted these to be available for seniors. And then we found you can't call them seniors, so they have to be this adaptable / accessible.
Got it.
So, you know, I mean, there are probably lots of other sources, but those seemed like useful ones. And there is this Vermont Access Board, so.
Yeah.
So we're in agreement to just.
Well, no, so does anyone else have any comments? I mean, I'm fine if you want to take all that stuff out. Does anyone care about that or? Okay, well, if nobody minds taking it out, we'll take it out and hope that people actually go to 20 VSA. And I think it's the whole section
20 VSA 2907.
2900 to 2907.
It was a pretty small section though when we looked at it today, wasn't it?
Yeah, I just would make sure that that section 2900 to 2907 is all about access. That may just be the the list
vet
of
that.
things. Yeah, 2907 may just be this actual list, and maybe that's really all we need. So, yeah, this is the form disclosure of compliance
Vote to self.
that, yeah. Okay, so we're taking that out. If you care to not take it out, this would be a good time to say that. Okay. So we'll take it out, and then we need to substitute this section for the previous accessible, adaptable section that we have already voted to have a public hearing on, which is going to be the 5th of March.
Not substantive, but at the beginning of this, I noticed there's a typo in one of the green texts up above.
Oh,
I
okay.
want to just fix before it goes into public hearing.
Where is it? That one, where?
There, those with physically disabilities, I think, I'm guessing it's meant to be
Oh.
physical disabilities.
Right. Yes, with physical disabilities. And to allow those with physical disabilities. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Take the LY
Physical
off.
Disabilities doesn't flow very well, does it?
You can take the LY off. Okay.
Too physical.
Also, are we standardizing between physical limitations and physical disabilities? Do we have definitions of those that we're referencing?
Let's see if any of these documents.
Maybe one of the documents we're referencing will have a preferred term.
Okay. Maybe can be used by virtually everyone regardless of their level of ability or disability. That is used there.
Yeah. I've seen that language a lot. I would support something like that.
Like level, regardless of their level of ability or disability.
Find a way to integrate it without making the whole thing really wordy. Yeah.
Yeah, I love making things wordy. But,
What's going on here?
we're just trying to figure out how to. Do we use
To allow those
physical
with physical disabilities
limitations?
to visit a dwelling unit. So you want to get the proper nomenclature in there?
Well, it's just whether we're using disability or limitations. I think mostly we use disability.
Something else,
the
yeah.
word disability. Oh, no, we do say physical limitations. Up
Has it gone
in
from
the
disability? So it's gone from handicap to disabilities to something else now, or?
physical limitations, living or visited by those with physical limitations.
You want to change it to limitations?
That's in the. Yeah,
That's fine. I
Yeah.
think, I mean, that certainly is more inclusive.
okay.
Disabilities.
So allow
Change that.
physically limited visitors is what. So in section A, it says accessible, adaptable dwelling units are those designed and construction for those living with or visited by those with physical limitations.
Physical limitations.
Then we
but-
come on down here to section 6.15.5.1. Then we should say to comfortably and safely house those with physical limitations and allow physically limited visitors.
It's easy enough.
Is that okay? Does that seem adequate?
I would need to like do some more research on language. I feel like I haven't heard the physically limited language in other documents or in my like interactions with the disability community. So I would, my preference would be to do research on what like the preferred terms are in these other standards that we're working with and synchronize with that. Or from other representatives of that community that have strong opinions about what language is most helpful.
That's a community that goes back and forth on that language too, having dealt with it.
As many communities
Yeah,
do.
No, 100% agree with you on that.
Yeah.
But I know people, persons with disabilities has been the one that's stuck for the last decade.
Yeah.
You know, you don't see handicapped anymore.
Right.
So that's not a good word.
Yeah.
But regardless. But I mean, that shouldn't slow us down though.
Okay, so
We can have this, you can do a little
question
bit of
is-
research and then.
We don't need to
have a
close
public
this
hearing.
today.
Yeah.
Okay,
We have, because
great.
the hope is to forward this to, for a public hearing.
Yeah.
Although we already have it scheduled for public hearing, don't we?
we have it scheduled
For
for
the
public
15th.
hearing, but what we need to do today, if people are amenable, is to just make a motion, since we already have scheduled the public hearing by way of a motion. It's to substitute this new section for its predecessor
So I'm gonna drop out a share here.
with possibly a few wording changes with investigation into disability versus limitations. So I think we probably need a motion for that. I don't know that we absolutely have to have a motion, but we have already made a motion to accept the previous document for public hearing. So I think we need a motion that we're going to substitute at least, section 6.15.5. We're going to replace it with this newer section.
Motion to replace previous adaptable language with revised.
It's section 6.15.5.
Well, I know that, but it's, how do you want to word the motion now?
The motion is to replace it with the
New revision.
revision that was discussed on this date. I mean, for our public hearing, it doesn't have to be as formal as for the select board
No,
where
that's
we
correct.
want an exact document. But for our public hearing, we're going to be taking evidence anyway from other sources, like our legislature.
Bear with me. What is, that's 615? What is the density bonus scheme?
The density bonus scheme is 6.15,
5.
and the changes are being made to 6.15.5.
As discussed. So motion to revise section 6.15.5 as discussed.
As discussed at this meeting. I mean, it's a start, and then we can fuss with the language further at the public hearing
public-
and at our deliberation following the public hearing.
So I did put a motion in the chat if anybody wishes to utilize that motion. If not, you could wing it too. Did I put it in there?
Okay, and what will happen if nobody wants to make this motion or feels comfortable making this motion is we will proceed to our public hearing, unless we want to change the date of that. We will proceed to the public hearing at our March 5th meeting with the other document, with the one that we voted on last time. And that's fine. I mean, I guess that's fine. We can change it in our deliberations relative to the public hearing. The reason that we have to do it kind of now-ish is because of the warning for the public hearing. What document do we want out there to be warned for the public hearing? And if it's you know, the changes would be that we're gonna have that first line under 6.15.5.4 would stay in there. The rest of that paragraph would go, and then the additional requirements would be in here.
Yeah, and word changes from.
Well,
physical.
we would take the ly off physical, but we'd probably leave those the way it is, and then we can change it. Yeah, we'll take that issue up again. What do we want to call it? Disabilities or limitations? We'll take that up in as part of our discussion.
Would it be beneficial to have this motion, or?
Yes, it would be beneficial. I
Okay,
think it
I'll
would.
make a motion to revise section 6.1.5.5 as discussed previously in our meeting here this evening.
For the planning commission public hearing on March the 5th.
For the planning commission public hearing on March the 5th.
Not to put words in your mouth, Ann.
Yeah. Okay, anybody want to second that?
I'll second it.
Great. Okay, any more discussion? Is there anything in the chat I should see? I can't really
Nope,
read that
we're
from
good to
here.
go.
Okay. Okay, so let's take a vote on this motion to put this tentatively revised language in that we've just discussed into the document that we're putting out there for the planning commission public hearing, knowing that we will be able to change the wording if we want at that time. All right, all in favor of that motion should say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
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 Okay.
I
That's everybody. Great. All right. So,
Situation.
and say aye. Well, you know, sometimes you see people and sometimes you only hear them.
Yeah.
and, You know, they're eating their lunch and, okay, so that motion passed. We'll make that slight change to the documents that we are now going to be posting for that meeting.
7-0.
And also the warning and it has to go in the paper and all that kind of stuff. So. Great. All right. Moving along. That's good. So that these items can get off our plate.
Of the business.
So we're going to go to other business with we've got a few minutes, time permitting. So the next major thing that we have on our plate to do is the town plan 26 work. And so I put a couple of introductory documents into the packet to look at. There are a few things that it would be nice if we could talk about tonight. We're also going to talk about this at our next meeting when the regional planning people come and talk about what outreach they're going to give us. And also at one of our March meetings when we're going to have our organizational meeting and also talk about future plans like Chris was suggesting that we do. What I want to talk about tonight is what the exact role of the planning commission is going to be, whether we should have a steering committee, what the planning commissioners, what we are all going to be willing to do as part of this process. The committees and commissions out there have been asked to fill out the implementation table from the back of the old town plan as to what they've done. Their next job, like the Conservation Commission, the Housing Committee, they're going to be asked what they would like in the new plan. There are some areas of the plan that are orphan areas, like economic development. We don't have an economic development committee anymore. A couple of other ones, you know, a transportation committee, we don't have that anymore. So somebody's going to have to take charge of that. So there are going to be lots of outreach activities like the farmers market. Keith and Regional Planning Commission are going to create a charrette, which is like a day-long workshop where people come in and look at maps and say what they would like to see happen. So I guess this is just kind of a brainstorming session to see what people are going to be willing to do, what the, are planning commissioners going to be willing to be like assigned an area that they're in charge of, or, have to get a feel for how we're going to do this work. Keith
I guess
has,
I don't really understand like what's needed. Like, because I can say that I would be really interested in outreach, but is
Yeah.
that needed? I guess that's my big question is, can we have
Yeah.
kind of a succinct summary of what we need to do?
Yeah, well, maybe. I mean, we're inventing this as we go along. There
Okay.
will be outreach that is needed, because the more outreach you have at the beginning, the better your result is going to be. So the outreach is to be determined exactly what we want to do. Here are the things that we've thought of, Keith and I have thought of so far, that we're going to need to do. One is we've already reached out to the different committees. The next set of outreach is going to be an email that goes out. Yeah, it's kind of on this timeline here. Then we're going to send out a letter to other people who aren't on committees. So I put in the packet a list of everybody I could think of that we might ask about different things like economic development. Well, we need to outreach to Heidi Borman. We need a letter going out to her saying, in the current town plan, is there something you don't like about it? What would you like to see happen with economic development? So one thing would be for everyone to add to this list, the list of sections with potential contacts. I put all the sections in there. Education. Well, we have to reach out to the representatives to the school board, USD school board. We have to reach out to the senior center. They do a lot of educational activities. What would you like to see in the next plan? So there are those are outreach for this period now. It's just getting the word out there by way of the Front Porch Forum, that everybody is invited to make comments if they wish. We're starting this process. Do you have thoughts about the town plan? What would you like to see in it? So that's one kind of activity, is just informing people that we're doing this and finding out if they have any opinions, if they would like to work on one of these orphan sections. Another thing that we thought of is having, and we're actually mandated by the state to have outreach to underserved groups. We have to have, we have to identify underserved, or this is for the environmental justice policies that the state of Vermont now has. So the groups we were thinking of was the big mobile home park. Maybe we should try to have an event up there at the mobile home park to find out what services they are not finding, or do they have transportation issues or whatever. The other group that we thought maybe would be good for a focus group kind of outreach is the Jonesville area. Who are those people? We never have any planning commissioners. I don't remember any from that area.
I'm
what
from
would
that
you
area.
like to see?
I'm from that
Well,
area.
I guess you are. Are you in Jonesville? Do you count as being in Jonesville, Chris? I guess.
I mean, I have a post office box at the Jonesville PO, so I guess
All right. Great. Well, what do you think about having a focus group focusing on Jonesville? Should we try to make it into a commercial area? Should it, what would people like in Jonesville?
I think what you're talking about is the kind of thing that makes sense, and it is what we did last time. I participated in the in the meetings at Riverview Commons, for example, where we solicited input from the residents there. And I think, it is possible to revise the town plan kind of on the cheap within the context of the Planning Commission's normal operations. I don't recommend that just because I think the plan is important enough and can serve, a broader purpose if it really does have true input from a broad range of people in town, and that means footwork and going out and having the kinds of meetings that you just described, Virginia, at least in my opinion.
So
Yeah, yeah, go ahead, Rebecca.
does all this footwork need to happen before the end of Q1? So between January and
No,
February?
no.
No. I guess I'm like confused about this timeline. I think if I were to put my 2 cents in, I think it seems like it would be really smart to kind of divide the town into sections and to have maybe one person lead that section with, and then have like, subgroups. I don't know if that's too complicated with how this committee is structured, but it definitely feels like it's a divide and conquer kind of thing.
Well, and maybe even more so, the steps that we took last time were actually to form a separate subcommittee of the Town Plan Steering Committee, and then there was recruitment, and people joined that.
Okay, that makes sense.
Commissioners, and I would recommend that just because it is a lot of work, and the work of the Planning Commission goes on, and it's a different skill set to some extent, and a different interest set, and that you can recruit people who will sign on for a defined task like revising the town plan, who may be reluctant to sign on for a more open-ended kind of engagement.
And I think the way it was divided before, Rebecca, was by the sections of the technical plan.
Oh,
You know,
okay.
so there are 10 sections. So like economic development, for instance, who is interested in that kind of thing, and who, how can we reach out to the merchants since we don't have an economic development committee, that it's like more like divided by interests rather than area of town, I think.
Okay.
Housing, we now have a housing committee, but there are people like racial equity group would be someone that we would want to reach out to for housing, because housing is an interest of theirs. Someone who was interested in the education portion, the reaching out would be to the toddler group, Tiny Tots on the Common. That's kind of an educational thing. The library, the school board members that we have. I mean, the school board is regional, but we have Richmond reps. So I don't know, what do people think about that? But I think the interest groups seem to draw some more attention.
That sounds good.
One thing that would really help me is that document of contacts is, some of them are organizations, but a lot of them are individual names, and I don't know any of the people yet.
Yeah.
So if you could say like
Mhm.
name and here's what that person does, or the organization that they're affiliated with,
Yeah.
that would really help, and probably help our future committee the next time, or end times in the future that we do this.
Yeah, I mean, we could try to make this more of a permanent list of contacts. Some of the, things like utilities and facilities, you would be dealing more like with the town entities, like the Water and Sewer Commission, the Highway Department, anybody who has a utility or a facility. Allison, do you remember being on the steering committee for you, me, and Lock Park?
Yes, I
And
do.
Jess Draper, remember we used to meet in the middle of the day? And just to coordinate the information that was coming in. Keith is keeping, he's developing or developed a filing system for taking in, we're already getting some information back from people, so it's gonna have to go in its different folders. So do we want to have a steering committee? I mean, how do people feel about that?
I think we kind of have to.
Yeah,
Because it has
I
to,
think so too. Yes.
That's my feeling.
yeah, I mean, it functions separately from, the day in and day out of the planning committee.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely.
So the thought was to have maybe a couple of planning commissioners. Keith, maybe a select board member would like to be on the steering committee. Maybe a member of the public. I mean,
Well, I think we have to
how-
have a recruitment process. We don't know who's going to be willing to do it yet.
well, okay, so we have the planning commission here. Anybody on the planning commission is willing to do it? Yes or no? Or you want to think about it? I mean, what is the recruitment process you're thinking about, Chris?
Well, I think, you start with, I'm trying to remember how we did this last time, and anybody who's got a better memory than me, please jump in. But I want to say we had some kind of kickoff meeting, and there was sort of an event where people could come and find out what the town plan was and how they could work on it if they wanted to.
I remember that too. And I think we had a moderate amount of success with that, actually. People did come.
And people worked on what they were, the sections that they were interested in. But the steering committee was Allison, you, me, Locke Park, and Jess Draper, the planner. That was the steering committee.
Right.
So we didn't invite other people to be in the steering committee. I don't know how, I think it was just the people who could meet during the day, during Jess Draper's working
Something
hours
like that. Yeah.
were on this committee that then took in the material that came from the other groups.
Right.
Oh, I see.
Was that,
And
As I said,
was that steering committee different? Because Chris, I remember being in a group with you and like a bunch of people.
yeah. I'm
Yeah.
That, is that different than what you, Virginia, than what you're talking about with Allison?
well,
Or-
what kind of group I mean, there were lots of different groups who were working on different
Yeah.
things.
There was like there was grant money and there was somebody like leading the whole effort. Someone not from town, like,
Housing report?
Well, the only grant money I remember went from regional planning to energy, to creating our enhanced energy plan.
Yeah.
yeah, I'd
That
have to
was
go back and
grant,
look at the emails, but, there was definitely somebody from, not from town that was kind of very involved in kind of, herding everybody along.
Yeah.
Um,
well, Melanie Needles came and worked on the energy plan.
Yeah.
And that was a grant, that was money that went, we paid money and we got, it was a partial grant and partially using up our credits that we had
CCRCP.
with
I think,
CCRP.
We
I
had a
think-
consultant help with the plan too.
yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Absolutely, we
Oh,
did.
wait a minute. I was just thinking it would be good to have, put something together to motivate people to take an interest, which is to say, what, this is a town plan, why do we have it? And how does it kind of guide the direction of our local politics and our initiatives, and, how it might directly affect people. So that they're so they have a reason to participate. If they think that, a change in the town plan could, allow them to have a positive impact on the decisions that are getting made. I think people would feel good about getting involved.
Yeah, and like,
No.
I think that also, like, when we kick it off, right? Making it celebratory and fun, right? This is like an invitation from your town planning committee to be a part of the future of your town. let's celebrate this. Let's be a part, like, encourage people to be a part of it, whether it's a potluck or a excuse me, a catered event from community kitchen. I think we need like a kickoff event
I like that
That's-
idea.
Yeah,
that's well
I agree.
advertised
That's
and energy is generated around it. And I would actually love to lead that.
Great. That sounds like a volunteer.
I offer the pool.
Oh, and Allison,
You
well,
offer the
Allison, I
pool?
think it's gotta be a little warmer in the summer before we get to the pool party. But
Yeah, we can just think about how much fun that would be.
yes, we'll think about how much fun it would be.
No,
One
I seriously, I think if, and I think I tried to say something similar to this the last time. It's not about me and my pool or my ego or anything like that. It's more like if we can gather people together in an event that seems like it has joy, fun, and good planning and good feeling, that there's I hate to like dwell on this, but we have had so many disappointments, so many sicknesses, so much tragedy to our town, so much damage with floods and everything, that we need something to cheer us up.
Amen.
Yeah, so that's good. And, it just takes work to do those things.
Sounds like a kegger.
Put it in there. One thing that I wanted to say about this memory that people have of, there were really two plan efforts. There was a whole visioning in 2017 and
Right.
prior.
Mhm.
There was a whole visioning part to the town plan. But then if you remember, Chris, the town plan that resulted from that did not meet our needs. So then there was a whole second plan. The plan that was actually written was the second plan.
Yeah.
And that's the one I remember because I was involved in that. But you all may have been involved in the visioning activities
correct.
and the whiteboard at the grocery store or whatever.
All of
So,
the information we collected from that first round was used to build
yes,
the second one. In
yeah,
fact,
to
I think
build
it
the
was an
second plan.
appendix. The surveys and everything assembled and put together by the
Yeah.
contractor was an appendix to the town plan, although it's very hard to find.
Yeah, well, I think that information is still in there in the current town plan. And that was all that was adopted into the little boxes for each technical plan. If you've looked at the plan that has the connection with the vision. So all of that work was used. It's just the plan was written a little differently the second time. So,
Right.
uh,
No, I think what I'm certainly remembering is the first one. Virginia, I do need to note the time and the fact that we're embarking on a complicated discussion and it's already 5:09.
yeah,
I
that's
would,
fine.
I would like to move that we table this discussion to next time after we've had a chance to, look at our notes and remind ourselves how it went and pick it up at the next meeting.
Yeah, that's fine. And just as long as people are thinking about it, how much work you're willing to put into this, because all of these things that are really great ideas, somebody will have to do them. So we'll figure out how they're going to be done, right? Who's going to
Well,
do them? Who
I
can
think
do them?
if I can just say something, I think that it's really shouldn't fall on one person's shoulders. It needs to
Right.
be a team and collective effort. The task can be divided. So I think that's how we need to kind of think about it. It can't just all fall on one person.
Absolutely, and I think that's a good argument also for moving it outside of the day-to-day business of the Planning Commission and doing special recruiting for a team to focus on it. Just because otherwise, I think it's going to be hard to fit it in. But that's my opinion.
Well, could I make one more thought? Oh, please, could I make another thought too?
Sure, and then we'll work on
No,
Chris's.
it's-
Go ahead, though. Yeah,
Right,
go ahead,
just-
Allison.
Yeah, thank you, Virginia. It's just that in this last 2 or 3 years of what we've all experienced in terms of the floods, the climate problems, and some of the political problems, and everything that things that we used to think of a lot have almost taken a second place because survival has been what we had to think about. I mean, how many times do we have to rebuild the roads, for example? And we've just had some extreme challenges for a whole community, but also for a whole nation that we didn't have before. So some of the things that seemed important to us then, which are still important, have had to take a second place. And I think it would be really joyous if we could try to bring back some of this first place thinking and remember what a joyous community we have had and how special we are. So that's my comment.
Well said. I would like
Yeah.
to move that we adjourn.
Second.
Okay. Allison seconds. And is anyone opposed to adjourning? Hearing no comments, we stand adjourned. We will see you at our next meeting on the 19th, which is when regional planning is coming, and they're going to tell us what help they can offer us, because they are mandated to offer us help and do outreach, especially to the underserved communities. So we will need to prepare our questions for them as to what they're going to be able to do for us. So.
Thank
All
you,
right.
Virginia. Virginia, thank you for all
Thank
your
you.
work. And
You're
Keith,
welcome.
thank you, Keith,
All for
also for
coming.
your work.
Great. All right. See you all next time. Have a
Good
good
night.
couple of weeks.
Alrighty, bye-bye.